Citizens of the world, welcome back to another Keep Yours podcast where we try and keep a few more dollars in your wallet. Today, this podcast specifically is for the 3508S, which is your PPP application for the self-employed, or for those who have a loan of less than $50,000. So if that's you, that's this podcast. And we're going to get into it just immediately getting into these forms. So first, we could talk about the paperwork that you're going to need. So if you're self-employed, you may need no paperwork. Now, if you got a loan, you should have given them the information you need for your loan. So basically, when you applied for your loan, you probably gave them last year's tax return. And last year's tax return, whatever the amount of self-employment income was, then they multiplied that divided by 12 times 2.5 months, and that's the amount of loan that you were likely given. When you apply for forgiveness, then that becomes the same exact math. So today we're going to look at the PPP loan forgiveness form, 3508S, and the instructions that go with that. Okay, so here's an interesting thing to note on this. So again, here's the requirement. It's got to be a $50,000 loan or less. But borrowers that use the SBA Form 3508S are exempt from reductions in loan forgiveness amount based on reductions in full-time employees or in salaries or wages. It does not require borrowers to show calculations used to determine your loan forgiveness. However, you still need to have a certain amount of expenses. Okay, so this says that there's no limitations. If you got less than 50 grand, you're not subject to all of the other rules. That's important to notice and distinguish. Not only that, but if you're on self-employment and you file a Schedule C, this money could very well become completely free to you. And I mean that the loan forgiveness for small business owners is they're going to not allow the deductions. But if you're Schedule C, then you don't have those deductions because you don't pay payroll. And so therefore, it's basically free money because that's what the law says. It's not taxable income. But that is between you and your tax advisor. This is not tax advice. This is just what the rules are. This is an educational seminar. And so consult your CPA and tax professional on the taxability of your loan. But this is how to get you through the documentation request. However, before we go through documents, it's important to know that you don't have to show your calculations here. You don't have to show much of anything except for to say that you used the money for what it was intended for, which means that if you're self-employed, you used a portion of it for yourself. Now, that portion is limited to $20,833. So if you're a small business owner who had 1 or 2 employees and your loan is less than $50,000, the deductible portion of that, let's just say we're at $50,000 total loan, right? Well, you can use that loan for rent, utilities, and wages. But the only amount of wages you can use for yourself is limited to $20,833. Now, let's say you had 2 employees at the time and you shrank down to 1 employee. Well, if you use your 24-week period, you can use up to $40,000 of wages paid to a single employee. And because you're not subject to any of the limitations on full-time equivalents or salaries, you can probably get to a full deductibility of your loan. But you can only deduct $20,000 for yourself. If you're self-employed, if you got $20,833 or less, and this is all you got, this is super easy for you. All you're going to have to do is file a couple things. Now, most of these forms are going to be filled out for you electronically. So you're not going to fill out this while this form exists here, and you could, in theory, hand this form to your bank and they'd have to accept it. Most of them are requesting you go through online portals. Those portals will have your PPP loan numbers already in there. The lender numbers in there, most of your info, the amount of loan, disbursement date, etc. That's all provided by the bank. This is what I saw in applying for these forgiveness this last week. So again, this is what I just talked about. This is your limitation. $20,833 per partner, regardless of even if you take the 24-week period. So if you take the 24-week period, but you're not an owner, then the amount you can deduct for an employee goes up to like $40,000, which makes the loan pretty simple. So if you listen to the general podcast that I did before this specific one on this form, in there I discussed how that's different and what you can do with that. All right, so here's what you have to agree to sign for this form if you're filing this S form. It's pretty simple. So you're just initialing to each one. First, the dollar amount for which forgiveness is requested does not exceed the principal amount of the PPP loan. And, okay, now, first of all, you should not ask for forgiveness for more than your loan. That's silly. You only need to forgive the portion of your loan that's your loan, not more than that. So, yeah, don't do more than. Okay. And then they're used to pay costs eligible for forgiveness. Now, if you're choosing a 24-week period, that means you have 24 payments of potentially rent, lease, utilities, interest on loans, and payroll costs has to be 60% of the forgiveness amount. So your amount is capped out at $2,833. Okay, so let's say you had a $50,000. Let's say you had a $50,000 loan, and you got rid of all your other employees, however many you had. Now, if you only got 50,000, you probably didn't have too many employees, but let's just say your business completely went away. Let's say you ran a massage studio and no one was allowed to come in, and even up to the 24 weeks, you couldn't deduct any of it. So you can deduct $20,833 for yourself, okay? Now, 60% of a $50,000 loan would be $30,000. So if you have no other payroll expenses for your employees, that may be an issue. You may have some unforgivable loan amount in there if you had 2 employees to start with and now you don't. So that's a little trick that may come up in there, but they're basically saying you have the costs, 60% of which are payroll for your forgiveness. And 20,000 of that can be for you as the owner. All right. If that happens and you're good on that, then you move on. And then the rest of these things that you have to acknowledge is that they weren't used for unauthorized purposes. You accurately filed the payments for eligible payroll and non-payroll costs for which you're requesting forgiveness. You've submitted to the lender the required documentation verifying these costs. And again, if you're self-employed, the only thing you have to give them is your tax return from the prior year. So that's actually included in the federal frequently asked questions. Let me see if I can go pull that up real quick for everybody. And the Treasury did release frequently asked questions on loan forgiveness. And I believe in here I did highlight how they're doing this. Yes. Okay, so self-employed Schedule C filers. Compensation of self-employed individuals is eligible for loan forgiveness is limited to 2.5 divided by 12 of 2019 profit. Okay, so that's the amount that you can claim as compensation if you're just self-employed and you have no payroll and no employees. And you cannot deduct health insurance, retirement, or state and local taxes if you filed Schedule C. Now, if you did not file Schedule C and you filed payroll report, i.e. W-2, you have wages, then all of a sudden these costs could be included. So when we go back and we're talking about the maximum that you can deduct, and again, we'll use a situation where you're running, you have a business that got shut down and you as the owner were the only one that continued to get paid, but you were on payroll. So you have $20,833 you can deduct for your payroll. You can also deduct additional amounts for retirement benefits and health insurance. So that may help get you closer to make everything deductible for you. So there's some guidance in here that helps you out. And if we look at everything else we've got in here, so my point on that, the reason that I went to this is they're going to use your Schedule C from 2019 to determine what that amount is. So if you have no payroll agency and you say, hey, I'm using my payroll, at me as the owner filing a Schedule C, and let's now take the scenario that this is all you have. You have no employees. You file a Schedule C. So let's say that in 2019 you made $50,000 net on your Schedule C. Not gross before your deductions, but net, because that's what it says in here is the line 31, which is net profit. All right, so let's say that was $50,000. Then your loan would have been 2.5 times that amount, which would have been $15,000. And that's exactly what they're saying here. You can deduct 2.5 times your net profit. So if you're self-employed, then the math's really easy for you. If you have no employees, it's all deductible. So it's the exact same. It's they gave you 2.5, you can deduct 2.5, you're done. Very simple. And you require no documentation for that because the math is right here. It's based off of your Schedule C from 2019. So when they ask for what documents do you include in that, if you're self-employed, you include your tax return from 2019, and that's all your required documentation. Pretty simple. A little more complicated if you have a couple of employees, but your loan was under $50,000. But at least you're not subject to any of the other limitations in case you did have to lay people off. All right, the rest of these things that you have to verify are information is correct. Tax documents are the same that you submitted to the IRS. So basically, there's no fraud here, and that's it. And then you say SBA may collect additional information. That's all. That's the whole entire form if you're self-employed. So that's super simple. A one page. And again, if you're in an online portal, they'll basically fill this out for you. They'll ask you the questions individually. They'll make you put your initials and sign digitally. And that's it. You're done. So that's the 3508S. Nice and short, under 15-minute video. It should be fairly uncomplicated for almost everybody. Now, if you have no rent or any other costs and you had employees and your loan was $50,000 and you can only deduct up to $20,000 plus for yourself, that's a different situation. And you probably need to consult a tax professional to help you out with that, just to make sure that your loan forgiveness amount is completely legitimate. Or talk to your bank. They might be able to help you out if you've got a very specific situation. Or, shoot me an email and I may help you out as well and see if we can't figure out what your situation is and how to deduct it. But the general idea here is that if your loan was $50,000 or less, they're making it real easy to file and real easy to come collect. So thanks for listening. Please pass along to all the self-employed people you know because they got free money, and let them know that not only can they get this loan forgiven, which they need to do, that money may also potentially be a non-taxable event that they need to talk to their CPA about. So thanks for listening. Do all the liking and give us some good reviews on Facebook and Instagram and specifically YouTube. We try and put together these podcasts to show you the forms and information on YouTube, and I also try and make podcasts so if you can't see it, you can listen to it and make most sense of it. But specifically when we get into forms and things like this and questions, we're showing it to you, try and help you out. So YouTube's the preferred platform for some of these things. Hard to get around just talking about forms. But please pass along. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.